alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. Niederriter. With me today is a guest, another wonderful guest, Marina Raydun. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you. I hope I got the name right.
Yes, you did. Perfect.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm no stranger to mispronouncing names and having my own name. But there you go. So, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you write.
Sure. So yes, my name is Marina Raydun, and I was born in a country that no longer exists, namely the Soviet Union. I came here at, I was 11. I turned 12 here. I have a history degree. I have a law license that I am not currently using, as I am a stay-at-home mom as well as a writer. I write in the general genre of literary fiction, women's literary fiction. They all tend to have one thing in common. Well, in all of them, there's at least one immigrant because, write what you know. And they all have a strong female lead. Now, not in like superhero sense, but somebody who has her share of obstacles and overcomes them in her own way. So that's basically what holds them together. I like to push myself every time. I'm like the opposite of what any author is advised to do is, stick to the rules of the genre and give the audience what they expect. I like to push myself with every project. So I like to experiment a little bit and push myself within the boundaries of the genre. So like I said, they all under this literary fiction, but I have a literary fiction with a suspense twist, or a bit of women's contemporary fiction. So it's all in that realm.
Oh, cool.
So that's basically my creative world.
Well, nice. That's interesting. I was an English major in college, which means I studied literature. But
nice.
but I as listeners of the show will know, I actually wasn't a huge fan of the literature I studied in college, but there's a lot of great literary fiction out there still. And I know, actually, because I write science fiction and fantasy, I have a lot of friends who are in the same field as I that kind of take kind of a leery eye toward the literary fiction. But I'm kind of in between somewhere. Like, okay, I write fiction that's more pulp style fantasy and science fiction, fantasy, that kind of thing. But on the other hand, I can appreciate the literary fiction, some of the literary fiction I've read, like Michael Chabon comes to mind. But I don't read a lot of literary fiction, so that's why.
Yeah, it's so broad. Like it's kind of like how you define it, because like it's literally from like anywhere from like Leanne Moriarty to like Paulo Coelho. Like all of that is technically under literary fiction, so it is fairly broad. Like penumbra.
Yeah, you could definitely add Paul. Was it Paul Coelho? To that list because of the ones I have enjoyed, because I really did like a couple of his stories.
Oh yeah, Veronica Decides to Die was my favorite.
I haven't read that one. I remember The Alchemist very fondly though.
Yeah.
That one especially.
That was a great one.
Yeah. So as far as writing literary fiction, obviously if you haven't written genre fiction so much, it's gonna be hard. This might be a tricky question to ask. So probably shouldn't ask it, but do you think there's a difference in the style of how you write the different kinds of fiction, or is it kind of the same? You're just writing different kinds of stories?
I think it comes down to the story, because we all make those choices of point of view and tense, and I think we find whatever is more fitting, not just for the genre, but for the individual story that you have in mind, because they will all read differently. Depending on the perspective you take. So I think it's more story specific than genre.
No,
in my
that
opinion.
makes sense to me. Yeah, that's kind of how I approach it as well. Though it definitely for marketing, like you said, there's this certain things that people always tell you. If you do this, your book's not gonna reach the reader the same way. I wrote a first and third person science fiction book at one point. So some was
Oh
first
wow.
person, some was third person.
Uh-huh.
I actually did 3 books in that series, but it's very difficult, and it did not hit super hard, super well with the audience. I mean, I don't know how. I didn't know how to market it either. So there you go. But I mean, like taking an approach like that, where people will say, that is more difficult, right? To me,
Yeah.
that's kind of one of the hallmarks of literature, though, literary fiction, though, is that the approach is often like, well, I know this is going to be difficult as a reader, so it's okay. Like I'm prepared to work a little harder to
Exactly.
get a
Yeah,
good story.
you have to accept that challenge, and the marketing end of it is a whole animal of its own,
No kidding.
which poof. I some people are just gurus at this stuff, and I guess I'm almost too lazy for it. I feel like I have so little writing time that I want to spend that time actually writing. So then I kind of abandon the whole marketing end of it. And then I get into this conundrum of, if a tree falls in the forest, so I'm like, oh no, gotta market. And I'm like, but I'm not really good at this part of it. Like, I'd rather keep working and improving on my actual craft.
Yeah.
It's
Now that I'm
tough.
throwing myself into the marketing kind of wholesale, I
Hmm.
I find it eats up a lot more time than I expected it would. In my
Yeah.
opinion. But as whatever, I have the time at least. I'm lucky that way. I mean, obviously, when you're a parent, it's a little different.
Oh man, them kids.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Whew.
Yeah, this it's a little
Uh,
different a situation you have there. So anyway, when you find time to write, do you find it flows easily, or have you do you think about your stories a lot outside of the time you're writing?
oh, I pretty much think about them all the time. Funnily enough, I sometimes when you can't crack something in the story, I've been finding lately that how do I explain it? When you first start drifting off to sleep and you're like in that like soft spot of like consciousness kind of, all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
something opens and you have to like wake yourself up to like write it down. So I basically think about them all the time. Um, I'm a very particular kind of writer. I don't have the strictest of outlines, but I do find that an outline is absolutely necessary because you need to know where you're going. Um, but I find that the real creativity is in between those bullet points. Like that you have to get from point A to point B, but the meat is in that journey. And it really depends. Sometimes you'll sit down and you have a very clear vision of that journey and it just flows. And other times it's like pulling teeth. But I think even like studies show that for any kind of creativity, you need to be at it at least 45 minutes for you to get into that proper like mindset.
Mm.
So I find that even if I don't necessarily like what's coming out at the moment, if you keep plugging, eventually you'll get like that golden sentence sometimes. You may delete everything else, but you'll find that nugget and you're like, yes, this hour and a half was worth it.
No, that's really interesting. I had not thought about it in terms of, a time to get kind of revved up in the
Oh,
course of a
yeah.
writing session. I'm not, because I have been a little stuck lately, and that's a good thought. I need to remember that one. I'm gonna make a note here.
Yeah,
So,
I find that to be absolutely true. And I find that like in any kind of creativity, like even like one of my, Zen things that I do is like coloring.
mm,
And I find I only start like relaxing and opening up after at least 30 minutes of just going at it. And I think that translates to writing as well. Like I start and I get everything set up but then I need to like let it flow. And it takes
Right.
time. And I have a little bit of eccentricity. Like, I find that a lot of people, I'm saying like a lot tonight.
That's all right. I mean, it's just a talk. It's just a chat, Don't worry about it.
What I find myself doing, like I know a lot of people will stick to the outline and you have to move on because you need to, some people have word count goals, and if I don't hit my 1,000 a day, it's a day wasted. I don't necessarily work like that, which might explain why my writing takes a little bit longer than some others. But what I find is I need to get that first chapter pretty much down pat, and until I'm done truly like wrapping it up, and they say you're not supposed to go back and edit, but the first chapter I actually have to edit and re-edit, and until it's done, I can't move on to the rest. I don't do that with the rest of the chapters, but I find that the first chapter really defines the mood, the character. Like, that's where I start hearing the voices, so to speak.
Okay.
And until that's done, I kind of can't move on. So that's where I get stuck sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. But I mean, I think I can actually see how I would use this, and the idea of, investing time and working toward, I mean, because like I have the hardest time. I mean, to full disclosure, and the listeners of the show know that I basically write full time, and
nice,
it's my
that's
job.
awesome.
But it's very difficult. But it's been very difficult to get through that point where I'm like, okay. Because I've also recently switched over to dictation, not to just rub the old salt here, because the people have been hearing about this for a few months now.
Mm-hmm.
But but I have my problems, and I do tend to try to exercise them on this show, so to speak. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, what you're saying makes so much sense. I'm sorry. Yeah, like I need to put more time in every session. And I probably need to be more meticulous with that, with the early parts of the book, so I actually get sucked in more. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of how I view it. And I find that in the later stages of the project, when I do go back and do my revisions, my first chapter basically doesn't change because I have already put so much work in, and that pretty much is static. But until I truly get it, like that's when they start talking to me, and I'm starting to feel them. I'm starting to visualize them in a more clear, concise way. And then I feel like then we become friends. And then we can take this road trip.
Yeah, it takes me a long time to get to that point with my characters in a lot of books. It's like, I'm like, okay, so now we understand each other, right? Like at the time I'm like halfway through a book, and my book's 150,000 words long, so it's quite a ways.
Wow.
In some cases, they're big.
How long does a project like that take you about, on average?
Well, it used to take a lot longer. My longest book took about a year to write, the rough draft.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was 155,000 words long, or 165,000, something like that.
Wow.
But and it was a little shorter in rough draft, just like 100. It was definitely about 150 though.
Okay.
Then I have my more recent work takes, and that takes more like 2 months to do. It's like 120,000 words, just kind of with the baseline where I started.
Mm-hmm.
Because I switched to dictation, and dictation is much faster for me.
Do you find that it's easier to talk it out rather than to type?
I did it first. It's weird because as soon as because I've been typing for 17 years, typing novels specifically. And I'm typing longer than that, but I wrote my first book 17 years ago. And I think it takes time, and and I got gradually more and more kind of put too much burden on the process of typing, actually, which is what it slowed me down eventually. And it made me a very inconsistent writer for a while there, toward the beginning of last year. And now, and this isn't supposed to just be about me, I'm sorry, but you asked. So
of course, no, I'm learning too.
And so I switched over when I switched over to dictation last summer in July. I just tried it, and then I thought, okay, this is good. And I had a book that had 10,000 words in it, and I added 120,000 words in 3 weeks using dictation. And then I just spent another 3 or 4 weeks editing it, and boom, I had it out in September. And people have received that book pretty well. The ones who have read it, I mean, it seems like it's got solid reviews. Not a lot of people, and again, it's an epic fantasy, so it's 120,000 words long. That's like a base minimum length epic fantasy book.
Right. Yeah.
But that one, I think I got the character a little faster in that one.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't understand the theme of the book until I was editing it. Just kind of interesting.
I feel like I was a history major, and when I was writing my senior thesis in college, they were telling us that, you have the idea of what you're writing about, and yes, you have a rough draft of your thesis statement, but it's not truly solidified until you have all the research in front of you, and then you're like, that's my thesis.
Oh, so it makes sense. Yeah.
I feel like with fiction writing, sometimes it's like that too. Like you kind of get it, and then you see it all laid out in front of you. It's like, that's what I was trying to say.
That makes a lot of sense. And for me, because I basically discovered that entire book. I was discovery writing the book completely.
That sounds amazing, though.
It was a lot of fun.
What a great, cathartic kind of process too.
Yeah, and that catharsis is really the word that comes down to, because I knew, once I started hearing back, once I started doing some press for the book, and I got some. I was on the Writer's Block radio show with I'm so bad, Jim Christina, who's been a guest on the show before, and Bobby Jean Bell, and they had both read the book, and they were and apparently the book came off as kind of almost didactic, like there were lessons in it. And I'm like, wow, that makes so much sense. That makes so much sense to me, though, because I was trying to learn stuff.
That's
for
amazing.
years. That's been my struggle. And
isn't it amazing when readers find something that you weren't even sure was in there?
Yeah, and it flowed into the story. And until I was editing the book, I didn't even have an inkling that was the theme of the story. It was about how you can grow and learn as a person. And it really was kind of a teaching story in some ways. But that's been been my focus for a long time, is how to improve my skills in various fields, like writing and cover design and stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So as for you, because this show is not just about me, but as though it does tend,
like you said, we're chatting.
We are chatting. But as for you, do you find that you revisit themes in your work, or do you and how do they appear when you have your stories?
I feel like I'm finding looking back that I do have common themes floating throughout, and they all come out through my those strong female leads. And I find that no matter what I try to do, I do go back to that, insecure immigrant child, and that's how she works through her issues. And it's not also until I look back and I realize, wow, that was actually kind of profound. How did that come out of me?
Isn't that the best though? Isn't that the best? That's such a great feeling. I don't know.
And when you get the feedback of relatable and and people write me their stories and what specifically they related to, and oh my God, were you writing my life? And wow, that is so cool. Look at me.
Yeah, it sounds like you reach people that way. You get this kind of, yeah, and I imagine that's even stronger in literary fiction, where you're not dealing with these far-flung places and theme and ideas, like I do.
Right, but I feel like there's certain freedom in your genre, because you truly can just make it up.
Oh, absolutely.
And
that's what I love about it.
That's your environment.
But there's but like you said, the relatable comments, and it's like you're writing a story that people might be able to bond with maybe more easily or more profoundly or in certain ways. And obviously there's advantages on either side.
In my first book was a compilation of novellas, 1 Year in Berlin and Foreign Bride. And 1 Year in Berlin was that was a story in the making for, I guess, about a decade. It really, truly was inspired by my own recurring nightmares of being executed in Auschwitz. Nice. And I for years it kept happening, and I kept waking up in cold sweats and grabbing my head because that's why I was shot. And then I started writing the story, and when I was done with it, the nightmare stopped. So somehow I worked through some kind of deep-seated issue just by writing. But then when I laid it all out, I had reviewers come back, and they were finding all these parallels of how the theme was, for some it was, a granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. And for some it was that this was a play on the protagonist's marriage and her projected fears of the inequity in the relationship. And it's amazing. It's like, when you go back to like high school literature and you're reading Chaucer or Shakespeare, and you're like, did he mean all of that, or did we just come up with all of that as a class right here? And now when you're on the other side, it's quite fun to see what you wrote and what people are reading into it and what they're finding, because we all read through our own lens, through our own glasses. So we will read ourselves into whatever work. So it's really fascinating to get the feedback. I always enjoy that part.
Absolutely. I guess what I want to say here is just that just resounds so profoundly with me. I guess what I'm trying to say. It resonates very strongly that, there's all these things that we don't realize. Like, like you were saying, did Chaucer put this in there? Well, intentionally. Well, maybe he didn't do it intentionally, but it could have been a real, these authors put real parts of themselves into their stories, and whether they intend to or not.
Yeah, because we wind up. Yeah, because we write through our own set of experiences, and then readers read through their own sets of experiences. And that combination just, once those words are out, do they truly belong to you anymore? Readers make them their own, and just that combination sometimes is fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of readers, and as you as a reader, what sort of stuff do you have time to read much? I mean, you're a parent, not a single parent, but you're a parent, and you're a writer. So there's obviously a time commitment issue sometimes. But what kind of stories you've been reading lately?
All I can say that if it wouldn't be for Audible, I would not be able to read at all. I applaud people who get my books and read them on their Kindles, because even Kindle is not an option anymore, because now I moved out. I grew up in New York, but we moved out to the suburbs about 4 years ago, and I drive everywhere. And Audible has just been a lifesaver. It started with, there was a free sample of a Stephen King book, and like, no joke, it was my first Stephen King book. And I was like sold, because at first people were a little skeptical, telling me like, oh, I don't know if you can really listen and absorb, but it totally works for me. Sometimes the narrator's voice, like the book I'm reading right now or listening to, I don't know if reading is the right term.
It counts well.
It's called The Flight Attendant, and it's really interesting. I saw it at my local Amazon store as one of the best sellers in my region. But the narrator's voice just really irks me. But the story is still interesting, and I'm still engaged, and I'm plowing through. But it's amazing. Even with my lifestyle, just from driving and like cooking dinner alone, I'm able to read between 10 and 15 books a year, which maybe is not impressive to some people, but I find it impressive. Because funny. I sure would not be able to physically read that many books in a year. What I mostly find myself gravitating to, I find, is some kind of literary fiction with like suspense element. I do like a good suspense element. Not necessarily thrillers, and sometimes I do like thrillers. I recently discovered Riley Sager, and I'm just obsessed. Also obsessed with the fact that I thought it was a woman, and apparently the author writes under a pseudonym, and it's a man. So his thrillers or her thrillers, I'm just amazed with. But mostly it's just like a good element of solid suspense. I read my favorite book last year, completely different in genre. It's more, I guess, in my wheelhouse of women's literary fiction. Was in a book translated from Hebrew. It's an Israeli book. It's called All the Rivers, and it was inspired by the author's own life of her love affair with a Palestinian when they were both living in New York, and how all of that transpired and ended. And that book gripped me so hard that it still won't let go. It was a year ago that I read it. And it's just like to the point where like there's a tiny fragment of the book where there was a Suzuki involved. And now whenever I drive on a highway and I see a Suzuki, like it brings me right back. I highly, highly recommend it. It's just such a beautiful, important book that I feel like changed me as both a reader and a writer.
That's excellent. Yeah.
And yeah, right now
impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't remember the author's name. It's Dorit Rabinyat, I think. She's Israeli of, I think, Persian descent. She has other books that I've been meaning to try in translation, obviously. But I started with this, and I totally don't regret it. It was amazing. And now I'm reading The Flight Attendant, which is more of, I guess, like suspense thriller kind of thing, where the protagonist is a flight attendant who is highly self-destructive, and she finds herself in a tricky position where she wakes up next to a corpse, and she does not remember what transpired the night before and if she killed him or not, and the legal problems and the safety problems that ensue from there. I'm about an hour and a half away, which is fascinating when you're listening to a book. It's not page count, it's hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm about an hour and a half from finding out how all of this ends for her. But it's interesting, definitely.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show, Marina. It's been fun.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Well, it's been great to have you, and tell people where you can find where they can find your work. Sorry, blah blah blah.
Well, Amazon is the best source, and I'm also part of Kindle Unlimited. If you have a Kindle and kind of like to use that as a library, my website is www.marinaraydun.com. Marina is a place where the boats live, and last name Raydun as in Nancy. I'm on Facebook the most. I am, I think, author Marina Raydun on there. That's where you can find me most of the time. I pretty much live on Facebook. I'm trying to be more active on Twitter and Instagram, but I guess it shows my age because now, Facebook is for old people, and that's where I hang out now.
Yeah.
So those are the easiest. And I'm trying something new now. If you join my mailing list on my website, as I am starting my new project, I want to do differently this time around. I want to kind of have almost like an accountability circle where I would be sending you like pieces of dialogue or certain scenes, inspiration playlists, imaginary casting. So you'll kind of have access into my creative process. And all you got to do is just join my mailing list. I don't spam. I do an occasional author interview, book review, book recommendations. And I promise I will not sell your info to anybody.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of people. They go with their fake email, or they're specifically for email lists, email addresses for signing up, because they're careful. People got to be careful these days.
Yeah. Hey, I hear you. As long as you'll remember to check it and actually click it open and find all my fascinating creative processes, go for it.
Well, great. And as for this podcast, you can find us at mentalcellarpublications.com. You can find my books at amazon.com. Demon Scroll is still the big one right now. I'm trying to push out there. But now I've got Origin of Storms, which I did mention in this podcast, that huge 155,000 word space opera.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
It's a good book, I think. We'll see what it's pretty new in this format, and we'll see what people are saying about it soon. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I'm now on storybundle.com. You can find my book, 10 Liars. It's mixed in with Kevin J. Anderson and a ton of other awesome writers like JR Murdock, who's been on this podcast. Travis Heuermann's in there. There's a ton of authors on 12 books for pay what you want. So go check that out. It's a limited time offer, folks. So it'll be done before the end of March. So I think.
Oh wow, awesome!
So
definitely
check it out as soon as you can, and you'll find something great. That one's got the ton of steampunk. It's a steampunk bundle. Yeah.
Huh. That's so cool. Awesome. Definitely will check that out.
Yeah, for sure. And so thanks once again for being on the show, Marina, and talk to everybody next week.
All righty. Thanks for having me. Bye.
That tears it.